Alright, YouTube, there's some very strange news right now going on. The Pope, of course, Pope Francis, who was recently elected after Benedict steps down, apparently, according to one activist in Argentina, supports civil unions. It's mind-blowing, really. The church stance has always been, of course, that being gay is a sin, that gays shouldn't be allowed to marry or get civil unions. In the past, they've done other even more terrible things to gays. And apparently, Bergoglio, who is, of course, now Pope Francis, as cardinal when he was in Argentina, of course, when he was cardinal there, gay marriage was a big issue. They were trying to get it legalized. Apparently, he, while putting on the public front of saying gay marriage threatens destability of morals and it's terrible and we shouldn't do it, apparently behind closed doors he actually called one of the activists that was supporting the gay marriage and said, "I support civil unions, but Argentina is just not ready for gay marriage." If this is true, then the Pope is walking on thin ice any way you look at it. Obviously, he's probably going to come out and deny it. The problem is this. If he did say these things, if he actually is privately in support of civil unions, and he comes out and says that it's not the case, that that's a lie, and it's true, and he did say it, but he says that it was a lie to the public, then what happens if someone gets a recording of that and manages to obtain it somehow? The activist himself might have, some sort of recording of this. It would basically threaten the entire Catholic Church, because then not only is the Pope supporting civil unions publicly, but also lying. Even if he didn't say these things, of course, there are going to be people who will assume that it's true anyway. The Protestants would love to heap abuse on the Catholic Church and say, well, he's the Antichrist. And actually, if you go to the CNN article for it, I will put a link in the description, you can see the comments from the sort of deluded fundamentalists. Some of them are pretty violent. One of them was saying, this is evidence that the Pope is the Antichrist, and he's soon to bring in Sodom and Babylon and the whore. And another person was talking about how we need to spend, the Pope needs to get together with other pro-family Christian groups and spend more money to fight the gay plague. It was hilarious, of course, and I was on there laughing at them, essentially, and debating some people who made a little bit more sense and weren't just there to say weird shit. But this could cause a schism within the Catholic Church easily. You can almost see the likelihood is this. If he confirms that this is his actual public stance, and not just a private, if he confirms that in private he said this, and he goes public with it and said, yes, I stated that I supported civil unions, then essentially a schism is inevitable, because the hardline Catholics, some of the people in Ireland and Italy particularly, some of the Catholics in South and Central America, not so much the Catholics here in the United States, they're the more liberal of the religions. Here it's the Protestants that raise gay marriage is the main issue. The Catholics usually don't care here, which is a very strange mirror image of Europe, where the Protestants are more level-headed. If he does come out and confirm this, the hardcore Catholics will never accept him as Pope. They'll assume that he was they'll say demons put him in charge, that the Vatican is overrun with devil worshippers, something to that effect. They'll form their own church. You'll have an anti-pope. You'll have tens or perhaps hundreds of millions of people splitting off the Catholic Church. It would render it down to the level at which it would no longer be the single dominant religion in the world. And I personally look at my views as someone who supports gay rights, as an atheist, essentially. I have no problem with it. I say more respect to the Pope if he believes these things, because it shows that he's more progressive, less outdated, and less deluded than the last few popes that have been in charge, and certainly more so than most of the cardinals. Of course, anytime you hear a story about a priest that's gay, or a ring of gay cardinals running altar boys into the Vatican for their own pleasure, not altar boys, but prostitutes into the Vatican for their own pleasure, you've got to marvel at the hypocrisy of the organization. But at least if the Pope is willing to admit, yes, I support gay rights, and he has actually reversed one tenet of the rather violent rhetoric of the past against gays. You see, other groups that the Catholic Church used to fight, it no longer kept fighting because it wasn't socially acceptable. Homosexuals are basically the last bastion of groups that you're allowed to discriminate against, give a religious reason, and get an exemption for it. He actually gave up the sort of we need to condemn the behavior outright and sort of took up the line of, well, we're still supposed to love them. So that was a step up from, burn the witch sort of rhetoric that you heard in the past. But I think it's likely that the Pope does believe this. I don't think that this activist would come forward and say this if it wasn't legitimate. I think the Pope is likely to bow to public pressure and say, yes, I do support these things. And I think you're likely to see a schism of sorts. I think the hardcore Catholics, of course, won't like it. They'll form their own groups or leave the church and become Protestants or something. The Protestants will, of course, the end times Protestants, the fundy ones, will say, well, this is evidence that the Catholic Church is run by devil worshippers. They're trying to usher in the Antichrist. We must stop them. It'll be hilarious to watch, a little bit sad, because it means, see, here's the weird thing. The Pope, if this is true, by virtue of being more level-headed than some of the lay people, will get labeled the Antichrist by those same individuals. It's strange. It's a strange a paradox of sorts that I don't personally understand. I don't understand how anyone can possibly say, well, it's a terrible thing for the Pope to support gay marriage, and here you have the comments on the CNN feed that I've got in the description. You can see a lot of these, they're just completely out of touch. These people don't understand reality, they don't understand science, they're living in the eugenics era, they don't have a clue what's going on. They're clinging to this bizarre, antiquated religious belief, which, by the way, is partially anti-biblical to begin with. Of course, most Christians have never read the Bible cover to cover. I did. I discovered the truth. I now look at Jesus as more of a hippie hermit wandering around in the desert than some sort of crazed messiah that comes down from the sky with a sword and smites all the homosexuals and witches. And that's more biblical than their fundamentalist view. The idea being fundamentalists are the most religious but the least actually theistic and spiritual. And a quick aside, that's another thing people have to understand, is that religion and theism are different things. You can go to church and declare yourself a member of any religion you want and not believe in that God. There was one Canadian study, I put it on my blog, I'll put the blog link there too in the description, to a study from Canada that actually showed that 33% of the Catholics there were actually atheists. It was in the wording of the census that they determined that the majority of people were still religious. Actually, when you dug beneath the surface, you found a lot of them were atheists, and 25% of Protestants. They've done similar studies in other countries, and this is a relatively static number, that about a third of the more liberal Christians and about a quarter of the less liberal groups actually don't even believe in their own God. And I apologize for this. I saw a Belgian study several years ago that said that 20% of priests there were also atheistic. I can't find the study anywhere, and if you can find it, please link it to me. It must have been pulled from the internet without ever having been archived, because I swear that I saw the study. I've never seen it again. I have no clue what site published it, and it would be great to see it again, because it's really an interesting thing you can use in debate with fundamentalists too. And I just can't find the study. I've tried every search engine to see if they come up with any different results. I just can't find it. So the Pope might actually support gay marriage, or at least civil unions. Very interesting indeed. I hope it's true, and I would even respect the Pope. Me, I'm a militant atheist and a cultist, and I would have to give the Pope my respect, because he would be less brain dead than most of the other Christians, certainly in this country, and to some degree in other countries as well. Peace out.